Welcome to the first ever episode of the Research Rundown, a new monthly series from the Inside Athletic Training Podcast, where we'll break down timely, relevant research and translate it into real-world insight for athletic trainers working in professional baseball. This week, for the first episode of the Research Rundown, Paul Buchheit and Joe Rauch of the Philadelphia Phillies are joined by special guest Corey Tremble of the Miami Marlins for a focused discussion on emerging research examining the association between hand size and UCL construction in professional baseball. Together, they'll explore what the data shows, why it matters, and how athletic trainers can think about these findings within the broader context of injury risk, evaluation, and player care. Enjoy the show.
Yeah, welcome everybody to our latest episode. Excited to get started. My name is Joe Rauch, assistant athletic trainer with the Philadelphia Phillies. Joining us today, Corey Tremble from the Miami Marlins and Paul Buchheit, also from the Philadelphia Phillies. Just talking shop on some recent research in the baseball sports medicine space, and specifically a paper that was co-authored by one of our co-discussioners today, and Corey Tremble, and just talking about UCL injuries that come with us. So, Corey, if you wouldn't mind, let's just introduce the paper. Talk to us a little bit about where the idea came from and kind of how you thought about coming up with the idea of just doing this study.
Sure. Well, thanks, Joe. I appreciate you and Paul having me on today. I think this is a great kind of installment that we're going to start doing with a bunch of different research throughout the game, and really hopefully show that even with our busy day-to-day of professional baseball athletic trainers, physical therapists, that a lot of great scholarship and literature can come from us. So looking back, this paper started, the genesis of it was probably like 10 years ago now. And it all started because when I was with my former club, the Detroit Tigers, our team physician, our family medicine team physician, was also the Lions team physician, and he would go to the combine every year. So he would go out there, and we always would ask him about how things went. And we were kind of just kicking it around in the athletic training room one day, and our orthos were there, and a young in the game orthopedic surgeon named Mike Freehill, who's now making a huge name for himself in a lot of great spaces, and he's just a tremendous mind and a tremendous friend. And we were bringing up hand size and how in the NFL it's a big deal. And it was really more for, well, why do they do that? And it's more performance in the NFL, the bigger the hand for a quarterback. The idea is that, they're going to be a more advantageous player, and it's going to benefit them more. And we kind of looked at it and said, well, I wonder if hand size matters for baseball players. And again, it really was just this conversation we were just having, and not really a specific, this person's doing their dissertation and this is the question to ask. It was just, we were kicking around ideas, and I wonder if a bigger hand helps a ball player and maybe limits them or decreases the injury rate for a player, or if it matters at all. So we kind of kicked it around for that spring training. And the next spring, we said, you know what, we should really look at this. We should really look and see if hand size has anything to do with injury. Because again, we're thinking, okay, does a bigger hand limit fatigue? Does a smaller hand increase fatigue? Is this really matter? We know that a lot of the forearm musculature is protecting the UCL, the ulnar collateral ligament. So our idea of, I wonder if a larger hand athlete actually put himself at an advantage over a smaller hand. So that's kind of where we started with this. And it was really just end of day chopping it up with a couple of our younger doctors that were really interested in what we did and what they did. And it kind of, morphed into something bigger.
So there's a couple interesting pieces in there that I find really fascinating and resonate with. The first is just the idea of we're looking outside of the game for information, right? So you've got a physician that's working in the NFL and the things that are important to our colleagues working in other sports, and maybe kind of taking those leads a little bit and then ingraining them of what's important to us and how we can kind of use that to maybe our advantage, or maybe just a different lens that we can look through something where our other colleagues are kind of going after. I think that's really, really fascinating. The other part of it is it's amazing how many of these conversations that I know each of us have and others that a lot of this stuff just kind of happens organically. It's not this formal research discussion meeting that happens and you're putting a paper together. It's the innate curiosity that I think a lot of us have as athletic trainers to keep players healthy, help them play better, and just the part of our jobs that we're passionate about that comes from conversations that we're just going after. I know, Paul, that's the same case for us with a lot of the research that we've done in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm interested. You had 189, I think,
Sure.
Participants, and
Yep.
it's always difficult to try and propose a study and try to execute it in season with all the other day-to-day stuff that we do. Could you talk about like how you guys put together the methodology and and almost like in terms of creating the time and the buy-in from maybe the players and anybody else that might be involved?
Sure. It's been a little while since we did it, but looking back, we did it on our physical day, so that made it easy because it at least gave us a captive audience, right? We always talk about if we can get things accomplished on a physical day when we have their attention, that's great. So that's where we started with this, but to kind of map out how we did in the methodology, it's kind of impressive to think about it now. Our assistant athletic trainer at the time, Matt Rankin, was driving into work, and there was this pile of trash that somebody had left out, and there was this like college type drawer system that somebody was throwing away, and he just stopped and picked it up and said, "You know what? This would be great. We could put the glass grid on top of this and put the iPhone underneath it." And that's basically how we set up the photo stand, if you will, for the pictures. And we were honest with our players. I think honesty, whenever you come up with this, you don't try to trick them into, hey, you're going to be test dummies for us. No. We just said, hey, look, we're looking at this. This is what we're thinking, why we're thinking it. It didn't feel like it was super scientific-y and really hitting them with like big research. It was just, hey, this is what we're looking at, and we think this may help us mitigate some of your risk, mitigate some of your injuries if we are able to look at you, see what your hand size looks like, and maybe we utilize you in a different fashion. Maybe we utilize you as a reliever versus a starter, or maybe we look to limit your innings or maximize your innings because of who you are. And it really, when we told them that everything we wanted to do was to benefit them, and it wasn't just to help us as a collective sports medicine community, even though it did, I think that's where a lot of this kind of played out with our methodology, why we had so many individuals between our major and minor league system at the time, because we just made it about them. And I look at some of the work that you guys are doing in the same fashion. Joe, like, how did you guys get your buy-in? Because ours was really just collected on one day, whereas yours was much more throughout a season. What kind of tips or challenges did you even come up with during that process?
Well, I think you're going to hear a lot of the same kind of idea from me and that you just discussed. And we were honest from the get-go, and we were upfront, and we didn't try and hide anything. We told them very specifically what we were trying to do. We talked about what we did know, and we were honest about what we didn't know and what we were trying to find out. And I think the piece that creates the most buy-in is when you're able to tie all of that together, that honesty about what's happening, and tie it directly to their ability to perform and their ability to stay healthy and their ability to develop as a player, their ability to perform really well at the highest level, get to the highest level, get to the next contract, with all of those things that are important come together. I think that's where you get the buy-in from. And when you can get guys to understand the whole point, and then you can create, for some of the studies we've done, create routine, then that really kind of starts that ball rolling down the hill, right? So they start to have players and guys start to have conversations in the clubhouse. They start to buy into what we're doing, and that trickle down effect starts to make things a lot easier. But it is a challenge to get stuff like that off the ground. The spring training is a great time to implement a lot of those tests, or we do some similar stuff as well. And it's a great place to start those habits for guys to just understand what we're trying to do. Because at the end of the day, it's about them, right? It's about our players.
Sure.
It's about the game.
Yep.
It's about making the game better. It's about making it safer, and it's about making, seeing players on the amateur and the player development side get better and better and better, and the best players stay on the field and watch the best baseball players in the world, compete against each other. That's I think a common theme amongst a lot of us that are passionate about research of what we're trying to accomplish. And this paper, I think, is an excellent representation of that. So, Corey, if you wouldn't mind, just walk us through the paper.
Sure.
You mentioned your setup. You mentioned the data collection stuff. Tell us a little bit about what you found, and then we can, let's dive into what this makes a mark for us.
Well, I mean, and that's the best part about doing, research, especially at our setting and our space, is that you don't have to be the genius in a lot of this area. You just have to play your role and your part, which was great. I mean, Steve Lemus, our team physician in Detroit, and Mike Freehill, like I spoke of earlier, they were the real brainchild as far as making sure that everything got done. Definitely not me. And really what we looked at was, okay, if we're going to measure the hand, we got to measure it a bunch of different ways, right? So we did a spread hand, we did a closed hand, and then we did this thing that was called the modified inertial, which I had never heard of before, but I guess it's a way of measuring. They measure a tennis racket grip with that. So it's a way to see that, and that's like basically from the ring finger, the tip of the ring finger, to the most lateral or proximal palmar crease. So it's like almost to the wrist, but not quite. So we looked at all of these things and took pictures of left hands, right hands, position players, pitchers. We did it all. We did everybody. We got a huge sample size, like Paul had mentioned. And we just said, okay, now we're going to pull it all together, start looking at the health histories, which was a big piece to me, or to my role with the study was, coming up with and making sure that we knew who had UCL reconstruction in the past, and kind of looked at to see if there was a correlation to previous elbow injury and the size of a player's hand. And because we had the ability to do so many athletes between the majors and the minor leagues on those physical days, it really did create quite a big sample size. And it was pretty interesting to see the results. What we saw was there was a correlation from our group of the spread hand. So if you just were to take your hand and spread it all the way out as far as you can and place it down on a table and measure from the tip of the pinky finger all the way to the tip of the thumb, that showed that, people that had the smaller handed group in our sample did have a higher rate of UCL reconstruction. And then the modified inertial, which I explained a little bit earlier, which I again never heard of before, but that was also it showed that there was a correlation between that and UCL reconstruction. So again, could it just be our group? Maybe, but that's where, if you love that famous line in every research paper that's out there, more research is needed in this space and blah, blah, blah. That's what it's about. But again, it started, if nothing else, it gave our group this, oh, wow, not only could we come up with an idea, we could set it up and we could carry it out and then get it published. That was a huge win across the board. And the fact that we did have some findings that were pretty remarkable for us, pretty much set a bunch of different things in motion from there. So now it's, what's the next step, right? Is it looking at hand size with their grip strength throughout a year, or is it their hand size and their pitch metrics? So now we know everything that's going on with a pitcher. So what is a large-handed player or a smaller-handed player doing to the ball versus the other group? So I think that's what's pretty interesting about the entire outcome of it. Was this was just one little aha moment, but it really set up for a bunch of different things moving forward. And I had a conversation with Paul about this not too long ago about some of the work you guys are doing and how it really has mapped out the next step and the next step after that. So, Paul, I know what you guys have done with the grip strength throughout a season. What have you done now for your next steps? Because I think that's what's, without giving away too many of the secrets of the Phillies, I know we're in the same division, so we can't be giving away too much. But what are your kind of next steps from some of the stuff that you've done that's really excited your group to get going?
Yeah, no, you guys, you guys definitely piqued our interest with this study because it does match up with some of the other research that's been done, right? The stuff we've done was with grip strength. We've alluded to that we want to look past grip strength because that didn't necessarily correlate to an increased risk of injury if you had like a lower a lower baseline of grip strength. But what that did was it kept we kept asking each other questions like, oh, well, if it's not grip strength, and there may be a neurological component to grip strength that we've alluded to on previous podcasts, and maybe some physiologic fatigue. But what are the muscles that are most protective of the UCL? And we've had conversations with Dr. Cohen, Dr. Erickson here, and Dr. Friel, who's a co-author of you on this study. We've been talking about how do we evaluate the secondary stabilizers, as they're called, for the elbow, and seems to be that the flexor digitorum superficialis and the profundus are probably the most important. And so, what are the ways to look at that? In one of our studies, we did look at pincer strength, but that was like more focused on maybe the FDP. So right now, we're currently looking at the FDS as a key stabilizer. One of the interesting things, we've talked to a few surgeons over the years, and during the UCL reconstruction, one of the things they do is they talk about how they peel away a little bit of the flexor from the UCL so they can visualize during the reconstruction. Well, there's an attachment of FDS on the UCL, and so if we're seeing a drop in FDS strength afterwards, is that a component of that post-op recovery that we need to pay attention to? But also, how many times do you guys see your orthopedic surgeons talk about the MRI on an elbow, and you're looking at the UCL and they say, well, there's some periligamentous edema around the flexor, and they don't call it a flexor strain, but it's not UCL. Is that actually what we're seeing? Is the FDS is being affected, and that's what's creating some increased stress on the UCL? I think those are excellent questions that we can all look into. So that's one of the areas I think would be very interesting to dive into. We currently are doing that. But with your piece here, now we can look at the anatomical structures, anthropometric measurements. Now you look at the dynamic stabilizers and say, okay, is there any deficiencies there? And then maybe maps that up with elbow laxity, with either the fever view or the stress ultrasound. I don't know. I'm going to kick it back to you guys. Like, where do your minds go at this point?
I mean, just looking at it on the surface, I think the answer is yes, right? I mean, it's like all of the above, which I think is what's so great about this. And one of my professors not too long ago, I mean, he reiterated this. It's there's no perfect research, and there's no piece of research that's terrible, right? There's always something that each piece of research can add to, and unfortunately, we're in a world that we love to just be keyboard quarterbacks and love to tell everybody how bad their paper is or how good their paper is, and at the end of the day, it's okay, what are we doing past that? If you're just sitting on it and saying, hey, this is what we found out and we're just going to stop there, I mean, that's the real crime of it, right? And I do think absolutely that the more that we're looking at if this, then that kind of mentality, that's how we're going to help really try to curb some of this UCL issue that we're having, right? I think just telling everybody don't throw as much or don't throw as hard. It's just, that'd be great. But it would be a really boring game to watch. So I think the more that we go, okay, outside the box, look at this, look at that. Okay, what if we add this? What if we run this alongside of it? That's where we're starting to get to some real answers. Will we be able to make any huge changes or, I don't know, but boy, if we don't try, then we're not doing our jobs.
I think one of the conversations I have most with people who are learning how to read research or maybe students who are trying to, figure out how to kind of navigate the space a little bit is understanding the part you just talked about, Corey, about like everything's kind of a piece. Right. Very, very rarely is it like the one silver bullet answer here. So I think papers like this, as much as they offer, I think it can be interesting to see how people interpret it, right? Because I think there are people that would read a paper like this and walk away and be like, small hands, UCL, not going to have it, not,
Right.
problem, blah, 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 blah. And I don't think that's a fair representation of what you guys accomplished here. And for me, I think it's very much what you both kind of alluded to, is like, what do we do with this? How do we as athletic trainers, kind of implement these things? And everything Paul mentioned about the dynamic stabilizers is exactly where my head goes to. And I think about that edema around the proximal tendon, but now we're talking about the structures distally and the different insertional points along the different portions of the digit and the phalanx, and how we specifically train those areas. And for me, it's not just a therapeutic exercise thing or the robustness of our arm carries. We're always searching for completeness in that, but it's also how we communicate with our coaches. It also becomes how we implement pitch changes and things like that, where we're asking for different usage of that soft tissue we're learning more and more and more is so crucial from a dynamic stability standpoint, from a fatigue standpoint, from all of those different components that we talk about and we continue to learn on. This is just such a huge piece for me about how I think about the different positions I've got to train somebody in so that they can withstand the forces that are going through this specific tissue that directly impacts, one of, if not the biggest injury issue in our game right here. So I think that's what's so fun about just the research in general that's being done across the game. But this specific paper, while I think we want to be cautious to say that it's a massive piece of the pie, it's a very crucial piece of the pie when we start to gather the information and put together our decisions on how we, take the information and put it into practice as athletic trainers and trying to keep our players healthy. Paul, for you, how do you take information? Well, both of you guys, you're both in director level roles. You're talking specifically to our front offices. How do you take information like this? Because they read the research too, right? This is non-practitioners are finding this information as well. How do you have these conversations with people about how to put this into place when you're talking about assessing risk on bringing players in?
Yeah, that's the excellent question. A very difficult one to answer, right? If you take this study and say, well, pitchers who have smaller hands are more apt to, have a UCL injury, then you have the overcorrection where nobody is going to get signed as that small. That's not, I don't think, Corey, what you guys' ultimate conclusion of this study was it's more of that piece to the puzzle. If you have a smaller hand spread, smaller finger length, or the things you found in the study, it's there as a piece of the puzzle to say this guy may be at increased risk, but what are the other risk factors? To me, it's an overlay. Okay, maybe their hand size may be a risk factor, but you look at all the other risk factors: the range of motion, the dynamic stability, their pitching mechanics, right? How well they train, what's their training age, what's their build-up for spring training look like, and how well do they manage their throwing program in between outings? That all plays into it because you guys have seen it. Do you have outliers? We have guys that you would say, oh my gosh, this guy's going to get hurt, and he doesn't. It's not 100%. We just look at the risk profile and say, what do we need to be mindful of as we help prepare this player to compete at his highest level and stay healthy? And so I think you just overlay that a little bit. Now, if you have a guy with a small hand, and his grip strength may not be there. He's already had a prior history of all these little injuries to his form, and maybe he had an elbow injury as an adolescent. Now you start saying, okay, maybe this guy is at increased risk, but that also there's some modifiable risk factors in there too. And we need to be careful on the expectations that, okay, this guy's going to get hurt, or he is at increased risk. We're just going to give him a little extra time in his training to maybe counteract some of those modifiable risk factors. And you're right. Front offices and a lot of performance people who are overseeing performance departments, they're reading research and saying, okay, if it's, as Corey said earlier, it's either this, then that. Well, the special sauce is our clinical reasoning to decipher what's relevant and what's most pertinent. And I think that's where we as clinicians have to help interpret that data and provide that information to, the folks that are also, maybe reading the conclusion and saying, oh, I got it.
No doubt. And I think to that point, and a lot of our front offices are getting younger and younger, and just changing their mindsets of what they're looking at as far as risk goes, because there's no club that can't take on risk. Like, you have to at some level take on risk, and it's a much stronger conversation when you start creating a probabilistic mentality of what does this player look like in the future? What does this player look like right now? And again, it just might be a conversation. And this is what I've kind of used this paper for, because when your name is on it and you interview and they bring it up, you kind of have to say, well, how would you use that here? And one of the things was, to what Joe said earlier, is, you know what, maybe it's just a GPS for what we're trying to accomplish with a pitch design or a pitch change, where, hey, look, if this player has a much smaller hand, maybe we go a little bit longer on that road before we say, hey, look, this is what we need to do. And maybe when we are looking at the amateur side of things and we're saying, hey, look, this player has X, Y, and Z, whether it be hand size or whether it be medical history or whatever, we can help profile what that player might look like as a professional. So I think there's great ways of doing that, because, to be honest with you, no front office, especially today, wants to hear yes or no, black or white answers. They need to hear more to it and the why behind everything. And they probably should, to be honest with you. And it should be our job to give them an eyes wide open approach to whatever we're doing. And literature can definitely help that, and definitely steer us into that mode and say, hey, look, here's how we're going to utilize this literature to help with our decision making, and not say this is the decision we're making because of the literature.
I think one thing you mentioned there was really, really good, and I'll ask Joe to follow up on this, is that you're maybe utilizing the information on hand size to help guide the pitching staff on what they're wanting to do from a performance standpoint.
Right.
Joe, my question on that one is, like, how do you take information like this and go to a pitching coach and be like, okay, this guy, the pitching coach wants to do X, Y, Z. How do you help interpret that information on a coach specific level?
I think it's about finding the common ground to start, right? So that sometimes that's easier said than done. It can be high level stuff like adding a new pitch that maybe we disagree on the ability to handle with the profiles, like you kind of mentioned, the multifactorial stuff that can come into guys that maybe fit a pitch profile different than others. And maybe that's a topic for a future podcast. And we kind of have some information to help that conversation. And maybe it's not aligned at the moment, or the way to go about that is there. So when those moments happen, I think you back up to the common ground, and at the very, very basic level, everyone wants the player to do well and everyone wants the team to win. So if you can at least start there, or wherever along the continuum that you find some area of common ground, then I think you've started in an area where everyone has the same end goal in mind. Now, how we get there starts to be the discussion a little bit. And we bring our area of expertise, and quite frankly, I can confidently sit here and say that I don't have all the answers on how to build a successful baseball player. So those different lenses, I think, that we've discussed here a little bit, are really positive pieces to the discussion. And our ability to master this medical performance literature research and bring that to the discussion, I think, elevates the conversation to a point that we get to maybe not the easiest answer, but the correct answer along the way eventually. So sometimes that doesn't get us to the spot where we wish we were, but in the intermediate and long term, we're going to get to the spot that we want to be. And I think that's the piece, as I listen to you guys go back and forth there a little bit, that it reminds me what one of my favorite things about being an athletic trainer is as we're kind of facing these problems, or we're getting this information, our innate kind of thought process, I think, is how do we help this situation? How do we move it? How do we take this information in a positive way and put it in our players' best interest, our organization's best interest, and the game's best interest? And I think that's the challenge. And I think that's something that I know you guys echo, and a number of different PBATS members would say the same thing. We embrace that challenge and our role in getting that there. So I would say, listen, guys, this is a great discussion. I know we could probably keep going this all day long and continue to do it. Corey, it's a great paper. I think just final thoughts on anything, Paul, if any final thought there, and then Corey, we'll kick it over to you to kind of summarize the last little bit. It's your paper. So, Paul, final thoughts.
Well, I think it was a great paper. Like you said, I think it's a good piece to the puzzle. It's answering a question that a lot of us as clinicians have had. And this question specifically is something that I've talked about in my previous organization. Thank you for doing that. I know it's time consuming, but I think you said earlier in the podcast, as long as you are working along like-minded people and have a question that you want to answer, it just becomes part of your process. It's not, research seems to be daunting. I know what it was for me when I came over to the Phillies, but kudos to you and the group for getting this done and providing that valuable information that we can now tie into our multifactorial process of risk management.
No, thank you guys. I mean, to be honest with you, especially at that time in my career, it was a much different time for me. I did not think that was going to be anything that I wanted to do or be a part of. But again, it just came with people that didn't want to just, do the same thing Groundhog Day, day after day. They wanted to make a difference. They wanted to make change. They wanted to be part of it. And that's where people, like I said, Steve Lemos and Mike Freehill were really great mentors and friends to have that happen. And I would say the one thing that I would voice to everybody out there listening, it wouldn't be so much about the paper or our findings or how we did it, but I think the one thing is don't be scared by literature or the process of doing it. Again, of the three people talking here, I promise you I'm the least qualified to be doing this. So if I was able to be a part of it and help, that can be done by anybody. And especially for our colleagues in Major League Baseball, don't let the job and the setting scare you away either. It can be done. It can be done relatively easily. It's a lot of hard work, but it can be done if you just want it to get done. And I promise you, your support will be there. The players, all the things that you worry about usually go away and aren't really issues at the end of the day. Your front office really doesn't push back as much. The players really don't say no, especially when you come with honesty and integrity from the get-go and say, hey, look, we're here to try to help you maximize your performance and stay on the field. So that's my closing statement on literature and research in baseball. So hopefully everybody else picks up the torch and runs with it.
No, it's a great message, and I echo Paul's thanks to you and Dr. Freehill and your whole group. It's an excellent paper and one we're really grateful to have in the literature, guys. Everybody, Sam is listening, and we appreciate him putting this all together for us. Sam Radbull, Paul, Corey, thanks for your time and the discussion. It was a good one, and until next time, go P-Bats.
Thank you for listening to the Research Rundown presented by the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. For more information about PBATs, visit pbats.com. See you next time.